God, there's so much going on in our lives right now. School's getting started. Life feels like it's getting more complicated. The politics of our world are just incredible and sometimes unthinkable. There are stories where we're saying goodbye to people that we love, people in our media's eye, famous people in our political eye. Father, we are here today to recognize that you are in our midst, even in the midst of loss, even in the midst of busyness, even in the midst of hurriedness. Father, help us and help our minds to focus on you. We pray all these things in your Son's holy name, and everyone here said, amen. Well, what I want you guys to do with me is to kind of catch up a little bit about what we've been talking about here in church. We've been running through the Gospel of Mark, and the Gospel is the story of Jesus' life as told through the lens of this guy by the name of John Mark. John Mark isn't an eyewitness. John Mark is the scribe to Peter. Peter's the eyewitness. The Apostle Peter is the eyewitness. John's the one writing down all of Peter's stories, because John Mark was about 12 years old when Jesus died. And the way he writes is kind of like a live on-scene action reporter. It's like when the news desk, the anchor says, "We're cutting live to Betty over at the fire." And Betty doesn't always know what's going on. And there's things going on behind her. And so, oh, there it is. And she just gives you what you see right there. And then they cut back to the anchor desk. And now we're cutting back to Betty, and she's over here. And then you get another glance of what's going on. But she doesn't know it all. She's giving you kind of just what's in the frame. And when Mark tells his story, he tells his story just through what he's getting through the frame of Peter. And what we know about that is that we see Jesus as presented just from chapter 1 as the living good news. We see him presented as one who speaks with authority. We see Jesus as one who is the healer of all illnesses. We see Jesus doing things that's not allowed. He's the toucher of lepers. We see Jesus doing something, again, you're not allowed to do. He calls the most vile people in the entire Jewish world to be his followers. He calls tax collectors to come and be his followers. He is the remover of demons, because you're living in a culture where there is oppression that's going on. And when Jesus is around, if there is evil, it's the big battle, it's the showdown, and Jesus is just like saying, "Be gone." And he kicks demons out left and right. He is the forgiver of sins, which is hugely controversial. That is that's the biggest thing you can't say, is I'm going to forgive sins. And that's what he does everywhere he goes. I forgive your sin. You're forgiven, you're forgiven, you're forgiven. And he just forgives every place he goes. And he's just making people really upset, at least making the temple upset, because only God can forgive sins. And he takes on the title, the Lord of the Sabbath, Son of the Most High God. That's what's happened so far, just in the first 2.5, 3 chapters of the Gospel of Mark. Wow. Jesus moves quickly. He's running quickly, and so his story is moving on quick. Now, when we started this, I said we want to know not just who Jesus is, but we want to know the second question, which is what Jesus is. When we started this whole series, we wanted to figure out what Jesus is all about. And he tells us what he's all about in Mark chapter 10. He says he comes as a ransom for many. What is Jesus? He's our ransom. He pays our cost. He literally pays the bill for our forgiveness. He came to save and to serve. So, now that we've gotten caught up, let's back right up to last week. Last week we left Jesus. He was in a house. He had just healed a guy with a withered hand, and the Pharisees were really, really upset with that. He says, "You can't do that." And then he also forgave the man of his sins. And right at that moment, the Pharisees began to plot to kill him. This is where the beginning of that story begins, where the seeds were planted. Like, this guy's not just a rebel. We don't have to just correct him. We're going to have to put him out. He's got to get off the page. And so this is what happens next. Mark chapter 3, verses 7 through 9. Jesus departed with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, hearing all that he was doing. They came to him in great numbers from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, beyond the Jordan, and the region around Tyre and Sidon. He told his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowd, so that they would not crush him. For he had cured many, so that all who had diseases pressed upon him to touch him. Whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and shouted, "You are the Son of the God. You are the Son of God." But he sternly ordered them to not make anything known. This is the word of the Lord. The first thing I want you to take from this first half of the passage is that when people were coming to Jesus, when you got those lists of places, they came a long way to see Jesus. They came upwards of 150 miles to see Jesus. So you see, there he is by the Sea of Galilee. But over in Idumea, or where the Edomites live, that's about 125 to 150 miles of walking, or by cart, or by camel, or by donkey to travel. So that's more than a day. That's probably several days. And as you're getting closer to where you hear about this healer, where you hear about this new teacher, this new rabbi that's doing amazing things, you find out he's moving around. And so you're going to go to where he is, right? And you're going to continue to shift your focus to finally get to where he is. And all these people descend upon him when he's in that house with the Pharisees, with the guy with the withered hand. Hundreds, if not thousands of people had begun to press in to encounter Jesus. And they weren't just regular old folks. These are people that were at the end of their rope. They've already gone to all the other healers. They'd already gone to all the other teachers. They've already gone to all the doctors of the day. This was desperation time. What's going to make you travel by donkey 150 miles? Desperation. And so they came, they found, they heard, and they were reaching out to him. They were reaching out and pressing out, trying to just touch the hem of his garment, trying to have some type of encounter with him. If you have ever experienced a moment of desperation in your life where you just needed something so bad that you'd do just about anything, say, "I have." Yeah. And that's where the people were. See, Jesus is there and he's teaching, but they want more than just words. He's correcting, he could be there correcting the broken temple and the relationship with God that's messed up because it's all about rules. We've been talking about the house rules, but they don't want that. They're not interested in that. He could be there removing the Roman oppression that they all cried out for over and over again, but these people that are pressing in on him could care less. They could be standing in the presence of the Lord, whatever. All they want, just like all we would want, is to touch Jesus, to be healed, to be restored. And Jesus did his healing and casting thing, and people could have stayed with him after. People could have stayed with him after he touched them, after he healed them. It says that the masses were healed, that the folks that were oppressed by evil spirits, they fell down and they cried out his name. You know that he shut them up, but he also made the demons go. The people could have stayed, but the text says that most didn't. Most of the people were receivers, not followers. Think about that. How many times are we receivers of God's grace, receivers of God, the salvation that's available to us through Jesus, but we choose still on a daily basis not to follow him? God's grace is given to me, it's given to you, it's given to us all. Thank you very much, Jesus. I am clean for the moment. Now let me go back to my life of whatever it is that I want to do. These folks that were pressing in on Jesus were receivers and not followers. And they showed up in overwhelming numbers. I'm a fan of The Walking Dead. Anybody here else watch The Walking Dead a little bit? It got a little too disturbing once they brought Negan into the story. I had to stop watching after that. It broke my heart. and the humans became the bad guys as opposed to the zombies. But one of the things I recognize in The Walking Dead is that there's always zombies somewhere, and they're always reaching out trying to grab you. I kind of see the scene of Jesus walking away from the house, and he's telling his disciples, you guys better get the boat ready. Basically get the limo ready, because this is getting a little bit out of control. As the seas of people, the throngs of people are reaching out, literally falling over each other, trying to touch Jesus. Why did they want to touch Jesus? You all know. Yeah, they could be healed. They want it, just like we want it. So they're reaching out, a sea of hands and arms, and he's telling the disciples, get the boat ready, because this might go south. I want you to think about the characters in the story so far. You've got people who were wanting something. Now, I'm not saying that wanting something is bad, because it's not. People that are wanting healing, people that are wanting restoration, people that are wanting to remove whatever oppression's in their life. They want it. There are people who are planning something. Remember, who are the people that are planning? The Pharisees and the Herodians. And what are they planning? So they're plotting to kill Jesus. And then there's a third group of people who are following someone. If you were to think about your story today, who are you in your story of relationship with God? Are you someone that's wanting something? Are you someone that's planning something? Or are you someone who's following someone? Who are you in your story of faith so far? I know I often waver between the first and the last. Because God, there's times that I want things more than I want to follow Jesus. And there's a wrestling inside me that happens all the time. And I hope I'm not alone in that, because that's just the reality of my walk of faith. And I also struggle with, well, I want to follow someone, but sometimes I'm not sure if I want to always follow God. Maybe I want to follow my own will. Maybe I want to follow my own desires. But the story goes on, and the passage goes on, starting at verse 13. He says, he went up to the mountain and called to him those whom he wanted, and they came with him. And he appointed 12 of who he also named apostles to be with him, and he sent them out to proclaim the message and to have authority to cast out demons. So he appointed the 12, and here's the list. Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, who he gave the name, good luck with that. Anybody want to throw it out? Good, I'll take that. That is Sons of Thunder. And Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James, son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus and Simon, the Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. These men were all called out of a crowd. Jesus left the side of the water, climbed up to the side of a mountain, and the other Gospels give us a little bit more information. It says there's hundreds of people that are choosing to follow him. These are the crowd of people that are choosing to follow Jesus. And Jesus goes up to the top of the mountain, and he then begins picking people out of the crowd, almost like elementary school kickball, right? I want you, and I want you, and I want you, and I want you to be on the team. When you think about the people that he chose to be on his team, these are not great characters. Matter of fact, these are some of the worst picks you could ever pick to be on your team. But Jesus knew something. Because in that scene previously, you got to see Jesus trying to do it by himself. And what he's going to say is, in order for this to be effective, I'm going to have to spread this out. Because I'm going to take the power that I have, all the power that you see in me, and I'm going to give it to you. 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 You're going to have the authority that I had that we talked about at the beginning. You're going to have the ability that I talked about to suppress and to push away the evil spirits. You're going to even be able to heal people in my name. I'm giving you all that authority. So that the message and the contact with God can spread. But what I love about this is he doesn't send them out individually. The later portions of the story says he sends them out how many? 2 by, because he knows you can't do your faith alone. It just doesn't work alone. Back when I was in Texas, I learned an important lesson. And that was, if I try to do it all by myself, I can only do so much all by myself. So I was running a student ministry. We had about 30 middle schoolers and about 25 high schoolers. And I was doing most of the heavy lifting in that. And I took our kids to go play paintball out there. And paintball in Texas in the heat is an amazing thing. I was the most epic player of all time. I dive rolled over a bush. I jumped over here. I was going to do this spinning backflip and shoot people. It was going to be amazing. But what ended up happening is I ended up tearing both the tendons in the bottom of my feet as I dove into a pit and basically realized I'm not going to be moving very quickly for a long time after this. So I army crawled as best I could, and I still took out a couple guys, straight headshot right in the mask. It was excellent. And then once they saw me, I was done for, right? Because they spotted, and the tears didn't help either. They could see him under the mask. And so I realized I was going to have to get up. And so I tried to get up, and I couldn't get up very well at all because I couldn't put any weight on my feet. It was like knives in my feet. Like, oh, this is going to be bad. And so I proceeded to army crawl halfway out, and then one of the judges proceeded to help me walk the rest of the way. That moment, I was like, well, how am I going to do my job? Because I can't even walk anymore. How am I going to do what I believe God wants me to do if I can't do the things that I believe God wants me to do? And what I did was, out of desperation, I said, can you help me? Can you help me? Would you help me? Would you both come alongside me and help me? And I went from a volunteer team of about 5 to a volunteer team of about 26. And our ministry blew up almost overnight because I shared the authority. We went from 30 in a middle school night to about 120 in about a month because I shared the authority, and it continued to grow and it continued to be strong. I think that's what Jesus is doing right here. He's simply sharing the authority and allowing more people more access to the grace and the power that he has. See, what I wanted people to follow my plan, and if they followed my plan, they might find great success. And I wanted great people, the best people, the most excellent leaders of all time to be my student ministry leaders. I mean, it sounds like this. I wanted great people who would follow a good plan and lead the church to success, or lead my ministry to success. But what Jesus does is this. Jesus picks broken people who will follow him as the plan and know that being in him is the success. He chooses people that are following him, desperate for him, investing in him. Now, when I look at the disciples, it's just hilarious because once you understand the team that he picked, you're realizing what kind of teammates are these? A guy writes this. He says, "Thank you for submitting your resumes, Jesus, on the 12 men that you picked for your managerial positions in your new organization, apostles. All of them have now taken our battery of tests, and we have not only run the results through our computer, but also arranged personal interviews for each of them with our psychologist and our vocational aptitude consultant. The profiles of all the tests are included, and you will want to study each of them individually and carefully. As a part of our service, we make some general comments for your guidance, much as an auditor will include some general statements. This is given as a result of staff consultations and comes without any additional fees. Here's our recommendations. It is the opinion of the staff that most of your nominees, Jesus, are lacking in background education and vocational aptitude for the type of enterprise you are undertaking. They don't have a team concept. We would recommend to you that you continue your search for persons of experience and managerial ability and proven capability. He's basically saying none of these guys are good. Simon Peter is emotionally unstable and given to fits of temper. Andrew has absolutely no qualities of leadership. The two brothers, James and John, sons of Zebedee, they place their personal interests above company loyalty. They want to know who's going to be the one that sits at your right hand. Thomas demonstrates a questioning attitude, which our surveys have shown that questioning attitudes tend to undermine morale. And we also find it that it's our duty to tell you that Matthew, the former tax collector, has been blacklisted by the Better Business Bureau. That is a hard thing to say. Better Business Bureau of Jerusalem. James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus definitely have radical leanings, and they are both registered high on the manic depressive scale. One of the candidates, however, shows the greatest potential. He's a man of ability and resourcefulness, meets people well, has a keen business mind, and has contacts in high places. He is highly motivated, ambitious, and responsible. We recommend Judas Iscariot as your controller and right-hand man. All the other profiles are self-exemplary, self-explanatory. We wish you success in all your adventures. I find it really inviting how unqualified these teammates were that Jesus had. From tax collectors to religious zealots to completely traitorous men and women. From fishermen to brothers who fought over everything. This is Jesus' A-team. And he invites you to be part of that team. It's not about your qualifications, because he qualifies you. It's not about your equipment or the things you've gone through, because he equips you. It's about your willingness to follow. And he calls you, 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 and he says, will you be on my team? Will you be on my team? What you can take away from this last story is that faith is never meant to go alone. He doesn't send them out by themselves. He sends them out in these awkward pairings where you have, basically, you take the religious zealot and the questioning guy and you put them together. You take, as he sends them out, he puts them in these pairs that you would never put together. It's like you're putting a Trump fan and a Bernie fan and say, you guys are going to be the best teammates ever. And that's what he does. You look at it, they're all opposites that go out together. It doesn't make sense from us, but Jesus had a plan, and it works. Allow him to choose you to be on his team. Say yes to working with whatever teammate God gives you. The goal, the purpose, is more important than just our desires. Would you all pray with me? Father, as we recognize that you are a ransom for many, Lord, we come to you and we recognize the gift that you've given us in your Son. We recognize that you've invited us to be in a relationship with him that doesn't just change our moment, but changes our existence. Because, Lord, you put us back into right relationship with you. Father, we ask that as we continue our time in worship, as we come before this table, that you would recognize, that we would recognize that this is your doing, not ours, that there's nothing we could do to earn the position that you're putting us in, this place that you're inviting us to, that it is simply out of your grace and your goodness that you give us an opportunity to come before you. Lord, hear us as we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven,